Okay, welcome everyone to episode 7. I can't believe it's already episode 7 of Paths Uncovered, a podcast where we essentially go through the career journeys of different people. Mostly it's been from untraditional pathways into tech, but hey, we're welcomed and hoping to get around to all different types of people because I just love chatting to people in their careers. So today we've got Cathy Moya joining us, and I am super excited for this episode, as I always am, just because I love having these chats. But it's great to actually have a catch up with you, Cathy, again. So I'll let you introduce yourself. I'll let you do all the honors.
So I'm Cathy Moya. I am a senior program manager at Microsoft, and I work in a customer experience engineering team. So I describe my job as getting my engineers to talk to my customers and my customers to talk to my engineers so we make better products. And the main products I work on are Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which used to be System Center, Configuration Manager, and before that was Systems Management Server, and I go back as far as that. And then I also work with Windows for IT, Windows Commercial.
Okay, cool. So there's just lots of stuff. But it's also, this is kind of what I love, is just the fact that you're like that little bridge between everyone, that little linchpin that makes everything really work, especially in tech, which is what you need to kind of, it's really handy having those tech people, but then actually communicating that all across and it's just making everything work. I love it.
Well, helping people understand things better is how I have it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Because I really just love seeing that light bulb go off. And so whether it's, hey, this is the feature we need to build, or hey, this is how you subnet your network, it's that same effect.
Perfect. Right. Okay. So, but then I do know, and this was thrown at me. So for context, right, me and Cathy met in, God, years are so hard to remember, 2019 at Ignite,
yeah.
Wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the last in-person Ignite.
Oh God, what a memory. But we met there, and oh my God, I think we met over dinner, and it was just, that was literally how everyone meets at Ignite, is like random events, and literally the sweetest person I've ever met. I remember you telling us about like how you and your daughter were going to be going to New York for like a lot of Broadway shows, and I never thought much about it. I was like, oh yeah, cool, they're into Broadway. And then like a couple of weeks ago you dropped the fact that you did like theatre studies in college, and I'm like, I didn't. What? Like, I did not connect that two together. So, which is why you're here, and I'm really excited to hear how you went from theatre studies and then all the way into managing all these things at Microsoft. But yeah, tell me about how, like, was theatre studies kind of just always an interest, or where did that start, or was it just like, yeah, okay, this is what I want to do?
Well, I started doing children's theater when I was in, I think, third or fourth grade. And I loved it. It was my life. It was everything. I loved all the Broadway musicals. And then we had a lot of the arts programs in California got cut in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up because of some legislation that got passed. So we didn't have a lot of budget. And when it came time to move from junior high to high school, they had just started a performing arts magnet school. And I actually was creative and performing arts. So they had more budget to throw into this particular school. And so I was able to go to that school. And we actually worked with San Jose Repertory Company, which had just been founded in San Jose, California at that point. And we had instructors come from the theater troupe to teach some of our classes. And then I started working backstage on props. So I was already doing professional theater while I was in high school. And so I thought, well, of course, that's just what I want to do in college. But nobody ever sat me down and told me, well, you could study computers. Because we got computers my senior year. We had Apple IIc computers. And, we were there playing with ProDOS and Turtle. And I loved it. And, I could, or Logo, because we had little sprites and Logo. I thought it was so cool. I loved doing the programming things, but no one ever said, well, you could go study that. So I didn't.
And I think it's a really good point. Like, I mean, if there is no representation or like a voice shouting about like, hey, these are the different things you can do, how are you ever meant to know and hear about these things? Like, I mean, data science, wow, what a really cool random field. But like, I never really heard about it until like one random person, I think over 4 years of college, mentioned it like in a passing thing or like some presentation, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Don't know what it means, but that's kind of cool. I never thought about it again until I ended up in here. So I'm like, it's so important, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that. So you went to college and did theatre studies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, at University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA.
Look at that. Like this just, I mean, all the movies just make it sound so fabulous, doesn't it? I feel like that's how I can, like, I mean, even when I was talking to Victoria last week, who I think you know, when she was explaining her life about at Juilliard and stuff, and she was just like, this sounds like a movie to me. Like the same thing goes for
Yes.
you. I'm like, yeah, like a school where like you're doing all the stuff outside of school and then you're going to college, and I'm like, yeah, this again sounds like a movie to me. This is great.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And, the nice thing about being with the magnet program is, we had a lot of, the odd artsy kids. And we had a fantastic band. Our marching band won competitions. We were great. And, our football team, not so much. But, we had the arts.
I like that. So you're in college,
Hmm.
and it's a 4 year degree, I'm assuming.
It's a 4-year degree. So I had actually wanted to apply, or I applied for a school where they had a Bachelor of Fine Arts, which is more of a conservatory program. But at UCLA, it's just a Bachelor of Arts, not Bachelor of Fine Arts. And
Okay.
so that's just a 4-year program, but you still have all of the general ed classes to take. And the UCLA program at that point was very holistic in terms of theater. So, we started the first class, the first Monday, 9 a.m., and we had Professor Michael Hackett talking about the history of theater. And you had to take that. It was 3 quarters, through the year, the whole year you were in that. And, for a lot of us who had kind of come from theater is, Neil Simon and Broadway musicals. And here he was presenting a very rich history of theater and talking about the many ways that it's been expressed through the ages. Phew, totally mind blowing. Fantastic experience. Great class.
So what came next, right? So I mean, okay, you've done the degree, you've absolutely loved it, clearly. It was a passion and it made sense. What happened next? Like, I mean, did you go into acting? Like, were you doing plays? What was next for you?
Well, like I said, we had to study everything. So I studied playwriting, lighting design, and I had some plays produced. I was doing some lighting design and I actually got some professional jobs. But I realized that if I was doing lighting design, I needed to get better at doing it a lot faster because the time it was taking me to put together every light cue, I was going to end up working for, like 10 cents an hour. Um, so I loved lighting. I definitely had thought about acting, but I also in high school saw actors living on ketchup and rice, paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And I wanted a little bit more security than that. So I'd actually thought along the way, well, I'll get my bachelor's degree and then I'll go back and I'll get a teaching credential and I'll do some kind of teaching theater. Except by the time I finished the bachelor's, I was just done. So I'm faced with the same thing that a lot of people are faced with who don't have a pipeline into something. So I answered an ad for the California League of Conservation Voters, and they are an environmental political action committee. And there are actually several groups that advertised in, the college papers and, various papers as canvassing organizations. So this is getting, your street army of people who go out and knock on doors and say, hey, can I talk to you about the environment, and gathering signatures. And oh, by the way, we need money to make this happen. So my mom laughs because I couldn't sell Girl Scout cookies door to door, but I was going door to door for the environment. And that was about the time that we had the horrible Exxon Valdez oil spill in the 80s.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
I love the Girl Scout comparison. That is actually just great. It's like unreal. It's just such a mother thing to say as well. Like my mom says things like this to me all the time. Like it's great.
Yeah.
So essentially you're now out canvassing, and this is a completely different kind of a turnaround, but this, I mean,
Yes.
it sounds great though, to be honest. Like it sounds like a really fun job to have. Like, and I did something similar where I was working with like Amnesty and Oxfam and stuff, and then this
Hmm.
was kind of where my family had moved to Australia and I'd come here for the holidays, but I didn't know anyone here, and I was just like, okay, cool, I'm here for like 3 months. What do I do? And I would just volunteer at like the local offices and stuff, and I'd like just go in and like sort through their papers and stuff and do a bunch of things on like the computer, like, I mean, setting up their Excel stuff. Oh god, what a memories. But like it's just always just so fun, like doing those little things. So
Hmm.
how long did you end up doing that? Like what was the experience? Where did you go next?
So I was in the field for a year or two, and then they had big political initiative in California where we can do signature gathering to get ballots in front of, or get things on the ballot in front of the voters. And they asked me to handle the signature gathering for that. And so that was an entirely different experience. And I was a little bit burned out after that, but it turned out that the office manager was leaving. And I realized that I could move into that office manager position. And that was where the tech really started to kick in. Now, I'd found the tech in college because there is tech in everything. I don't care if you're doing fashion or theater or music, there is tech in there. And
Yeah.
so I was good at that. I was writing my plays on WordStar and WordPerfect 2.0 or 1.0. But now, as the office manager, I had to work with Lotus 123 for DOS, which was a forerunner to Excel for
Okay.
DOS. But I taught myself DOS as I was there trying to learn the computer systems. So I had a boyfriend who I think taught me the CD command, change directory, and the dir command, so it would show what was in each directory. And then I started saying, well, what happens if I type this? Because I knew if I typed the Lotus 123, it started that app. But then I was learning about all of the other types of files that were in there. And it just made sense. And then in Lotus 123, I was learning how to code macros because I was really good at the logic of,
Yeah.
okay, well, it's doing this, and then I need an if here, and I need to branch off of this. And I loved it.
That sounds amazing. And I love it was such a natural progression. And honestly, it's something I've noticed even in the last couple of episodes where music and like specifically I was gonna say other things and I'm like, no, it's actually specifically really music. Like people in music careers or doing music, studying music, technology is such a big part that like you just kind of get into it and then it just spirals into something completely different from just doing music. And it's kind of the same thing. Like I mean, technology is just everywhere now. Like I get it might have been little bit less at that stage, but now it's just I'm sorry, I don't understand how I can function a day without like some kind of technology in my hand. It is crazy and a little bit terrifying that I couldn't make it through like an 8 hour like power shutdown here, and I'm like, nah, this is not my life anymore. But that is the world we live in, and it's so cool that like you just kind of adapt it to it. You're like, right, let's go. This is kind of fun. Let me just make the most of it, and you just kind of kept going.
Yeah, it's why I have kind of a beef about the idea of women in tech,
Yeah.
because anybody working professionally right now is in tech. I don't care what industry you're in, you better be finding the tech and doing it there.
I mean, it's like it's impossible to not do it, right? Like if you're looking
It
at
should
emails, you're
be.
doing tech.
Yeah, well, and so are you just doing the email, or are you really using all of the features of your email? And
Exactly.
how are you escalating that and using it to make yourself more efficient? Are you using Power Apps or Power BI to make your work better and faster and more accessible to everybody in your org?
I love that. That yes. So much more to it than I think people even realize. And they're like, yeah, but I'm already doing that. And I'm like, yes, exactly. That's my point. So you're in the office job now and you're learning all these different tech stuff. You're leveraging even more of it, just kind of seeing what else you can do. The curiosity's kind of hitting in. So what came next? Like, as in, did you continue in the
Uh,
office manager role for a long time or?
no, I was only in it for maybe a year or so, and
Yep.
I met a guy, and he was actually, I think, the one who was telling me about the DOS stuff. But he was moving from LA to the Bay Area because he worked in computers and he had a job up there. And I was from the Bay Area, and so I just decided, yeah, I'm gonna move back to the Bay Area. And then it's like, well, what am I gonna do back in the Bay Area? So I went and registered at the temp agencies, and they had the tests and things, all the technology stuff. And of course, I'm acing all of those, and I can type really fast. Thank you, Mom, for making me take that typing course in high school,
They
summer
make a
school.
difference.
Yeah, I still thank her to this day. So I had marketable skills in the temp industry, and they found out pretty quickly they could send me on anything related to any computer stuff, and I would just figure it out. But one day they sent me to a Coca-Cola bottling plant, and they had me sitting in a conference room with a 10 key calculator, and I was adding up page after page of numbers from like these driver reports, and then I would take my totals into a guy who was putting those into a Lotus 123 spreadsheet. And I said, no, 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 no. You need to build a spreadsheet and just be adding all the numbers up in here. And they said, well, we don't know how to do this. Somebody else built us this spreadsheet. And so I told my agency, I'm not going back to sit in a conference room with a calculator. If they want me to build a spreadsheet, I will go back and I will build them a spreadsheet. And they wanted me to come back and build them a spreadsheet. So that was my first, like really good, kind of, and they gave me more money for it. So I did, that contract, and then there was another company that really needed someone to help with their IT stuff that was, kind of nearby. And I think it was maybe through the agency that I got that, and so I became their desktop IT support person, even though I didn't know much about it.
I love that though. Like I said, I'm like, I can do this. Let's make it work. It's essentially kind of what happens.
Well, and I still remember at one point, very early on, they said, okay, this guy's printer isn't working. And it's like, well, okay, this printer is working, this printer is not working. What's the difference between the computer with the printer working and not? And so that was just logic, and that was troubleshooting, and I could do it.
I love that you break it down into such little bits of like, that's essentially what it is. Like, I mean, it's very basic of this does, this doesn't, this does. End of story.
Yeah. Yeah. So you keep swapping out things till you get something that works.
Exactly. And I mean, it's the same principle we live by, like, as in I live by and work by in terms of when I'm coding or doing some kind of solution building in like Python or R or whatever language I'm using, where it's like, let me try this thing I found and let's see if it works. And if it doesn't, we'll see where it goes.
Although that was the early 90s, and we didn't have the internet publicly available at that point.
That's a very good differentiating point, let's be real. I don't know what I would be like without a Google. Like the other day, I swear, I just hadn't coded in so long that like really basic stuff, like literally just reading something in, I think I'd missed like a specific like comma or something somewhere, and I was just like, why is this not working? Like, I'm surely able to read a file in, like this is not something I can't do. But hey, Google helped out, where literally all I just pointed out was I was missing a column. But look, we'll move on from those things. So you're doing all these kind of ad hoc jobs at the moment, and did that continue on? Like, it was just kind of whatever different type of things came up? Because that's great, like it's kind of consulting, right? You're learning all these different things, but how did that kind of keep going?
So the boyfriend got me a job at a company called 3Com, which used to be a major player in networking. I think they're still around, but I don't know what's happening with them. They used to be a major network adapter company. And so I was working in their IT department. And then the training company that they were hiring called ExecuTrain. And I really loved training. That helping people understand things better. I had actually organized a couple of training courses in Lotus 123 back at the company where I was doing the IT support. And I thought, well, yeah, I would love to train people in how to use computer stuff. So I got an interview there, got a job. They gave me a train the trainer course, which I took to very easily with all my theater background. And I started doing, 5 shows a week, teaching people how to use,
Yeah.
well, Word, PowerPoint, etc., but also Word Perfect, Harvard Graphics, Lotus 123. This is that generation of moving into the Windows era. And then they sent me to Novell School so that I could get my certified
Yeah.
Novell administrator, and then I could teach their Novell curriculum. So that was my first experience with networking. And then after we parted ways, I went back to the school where I had done my Novell training, and they were hiring for Microsoft trainers. And so I did just a little, kind of a sample teaching lesson on the Novell side to show them what I could do. And they decided, yes, they were going to hire me. And they had me attend the Microsoft class, and then I had to take you had to attend it, you had to take the test, and then you could teach it. So we had a vendor trainer who would come in and do it, and then he ended up working for Microsoft, so I don't feel too bad about putting him out of work there. But I would learn it. I would turn around and I would start teaching it. So I learned all of the Microsoft curriculum, and I started to get to know some people at Microsoft, because now we had the internet, we had bulletin boards on NNTP news groups, and we could talk to other trainers, and I met the guy who was very instrumental in the product that I ended up training the most, which was Systems Management Server at the time.
And I think something that's just really jumped out and continues to jump out at me is the networking part of it, right? Like it almost like, I mean, things happen because you were like talking to different people, like even the office manager job, we're like, well, that's happening, so let me do this. Moving from different place to place. And like, I mean, my point there is right. I mean, it's so easy to do those kind of things today, like LinkedIn and meetup groups, and God, there's like 100 million different ways you can do that on a daily basis. And people still don't leverage that enough, I think. But it's so good to hear that. Like, I mean, even when the opportunities to do it were quite limited back then in terms of the ways you could do it. I'm not saying that networking was limited, but it's just the ways you could do it were a lot more limited to, like, say, just your locality and stuff. Before, obviously, the bulletin boards came in. But like, it's so important, and I really hope, like, if people are listening, like, networking makes such a difference. Please make the effort. Like, it's so worth it, and you can kind of hear it almost every person's life. Like, some kind of connection came back and helped, and it's the exact same thing, right? Like, you've built all these connections at Microsoft, and was that next? Like, was the next move going into Microsoft full time?
Well, actually, it was a contract at Microsoft first.
Yeah.
So there is a guy who is legendary in the SMS world, Wally Mead, and he had written the courses that I had been teaching for years. And then we were getting ready for a new version of Systems Management Server, and they asked him, who could you work with among the current crop of trainers? And my name was at the top of the list. And I think part of the reason it was there was because there was a frequently asked questions that I kept about the course, so that when people came into the news group, they didn't keep asking the same question over and over. Or if they did ask the same question, Wally didn't have to keep answering the same question over and over. It's like, look in the FAQ, number 12. That one, 18. And I kept the FAQ up to date. And, they knew that if Wally liked me, that, we would work well together. And so I got a contract, but then the product slipped. And so they said, hey, we're going to cancel the contract, but we like you. Would you like to come interview for a full-time job? And at first I said no, because I said it's not a good time to move out of California. Now, I'd had my daughter in the year 2000, September of 2000. And so she was about a year old. And I love training, but training is a very difficult job to do when you're a parent. You have a class schedule that you need to stick to because there are students. There's not flexibility. Even trying to get my OBGYN visits in while I was training was often very complicated because, it's a week-long class. You can't just take like 2 hours out of a day to go see an OBGYN. So I was at the point where I wasn't sure if I could continue training when this contract came along. So I said, great, let's do the contract. And then I started to think, well, okay, if I did interview for this, it may give me a little bit more flexibility. So I interviewed, they offered me the job, although I wasn't working on SMS anymore. Now I was working on security courseware. And I said, I know nothing about security. They said, that's okay, we'll teach you. And they did. And so I learned a lot about security. And I was in as a full-time employee at Microsoft writing courseware.
It's all like, I don't think there's, I mean, honestly, if you're in an interview and you hear, don't worry about it, we'll teach you. I'm like, take the job. That is like the biggest green flag you can see about a job at this time. I'm like, take it. Like, don't even look back. Like, it makes such a difference that they're like, yeah, we got you. Like, we're going to take the lead. We'll figure it out. God, I love that. Because that's essentially what happened to me. And I'm like, I will always support that kind of a behavior. I'm like, yes, all about this. Okay, amazing. And I love that you mentioned kind of, like, and this is the thing, right? People tend to forget. I think Donna Sarkar mentioned this before. She's like, there's people building this tech. Like, there is lives behind tech. I know we're building it for other people, but there's also people behind the people. God, I said people about 1 billion times in that sentence. But we kind of get the gist of it, right? And it's like that whole Humans of IT movement came along from there. And it's so important to mention those kind of things. Like, every career decision isn't based on, oh my God, this is a good opportunity, it's better pay, it's a better location, whatever else. There's real life consequences to things. Like, you can't manage to do 9 to 5 constant teaching when you've got kids, and like, you have to deal with that.
Yeah.
So you're now moved to Redmond, right? Like, so that's what happened.
Yep. Yeah, Microsoft relocated me. They packed every stick of furniture, every dish. I didn't have to do a thing. They gave us a great relocation with temporary housing. I'm going, this is awesome. I love this company. And my husband moved up as the stay-at-home dad, and he did that for several years. So I always really need to give him a shout out for being a guy who was willing to do that, because it's as much discrimination as women get in the workplace, men get that when they take on primary caregiving roles.
That is very true. I mean, I've seen it in places you're like, good God, the double standards. But
Yes.
God, like, that's another rabbit hole that we could dive in and just talk for hours on, realistically. Let's be real, double standards everywhere. But
Yeah.
so you're doing courseware in security, and you're kind of just learning security as you go. So did that just keep going from there? Like, what was happening in the Microsoft world? Because I know you've been there a while now.
Yeah, I've been there 19 years. So, just
Oh wow.
my first year working on some really cool stuff. But then they were going to reorganize the team with the training and certification group and the Microsoft Press group. And they said, well, you should really kind of look around and have a backup plan, because we may not be keeping everybody after this reorg. And it turned out that I had met the people on the SMS doc team when I first was doing the contract, because there was going to need to be a lot of back and forth with the doc team. And then I saw a job come open on the doc team. And really, when I said no to the job initially, I said, but what I really want to do is work on the doc team. And they said, well, get your foot in the door, get in here, and then you can always move to the doc team. And that was exactly what happened. So I already knew people there. It was a very easy interview loop. I loved them. They loved me. And I was in the team, and I loved that team. We had Brad Anderson, who was newly over from Novell, at the helm, and he ran a really good org, already doing diversity inclusion. This was back in like 2003, decades ago. It was really important to him way back then, and I loved it.
Oh, that is. I mean, that's a hallmark of a good team, especially if the team leader is like leading the right way and stuff. Like, it makes such a big difference, really, at the end of the day. It's so interesting, I think, and there's been people that have had like really kind of right angle shifts, like where it's like, I did X and then like pivoted completely like in 180 degree into like, I don't know why. Like, I mean, so I knew someone who was working as like Kim, who worked as a sailing manager at a sailing club. And then went to Twitter next. And I'm like, this makes no sense. Like, where is this going? And it was a great conversation. But I think at the same time, the conversations like this, where it was like a very natural progression into different things, right? I mean, so it was so clear. I'm like, it just worked. I mean, from the voting stuff and the office managing stuff, it just spiraled into more and more things. And you found different things you got passionate for, and you just kind of went like the doc team, like where I was like, I really want to try this other thing, let me go do it. And I love how like fluid and organic that progression has been, essentially, where it's just been like things just make sense at the right time at the right place.
Mm-hmm. And I ended up writing security documentation for SMS. Well, what ended up being System Center Configuration Manager 2007. All the security doc, which I think is still up there somewhere, I wrote.
That's pretty cool. I love just kind of those kind of things of like, I did that. It's there, and people have used it.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now? Like, do you want to go a little into exactly what's happening now? I know you touched on it a little bit, but like, kind of what your work is like today.
Well, just for a little bit of context, with even right angle shifts within Microsoft, because Microsoft is really a lot of little companies doing their thing. So I went to the hardware group for 2 or 3 years. So, if you opened a box of Microsoft product to take out a mouse or a keyboard, there's that little piece of paper that you throw away. Yeah. That was mine. That was the one job I've had at Microsoft where I could actually like put it up on the refrigerator and show my mother, I did this.
Oh my God, the thing you threw away.
But yeah. Well, nobody ever reads it, but somebody,
Everyone knows exactly what that is, though. Like, it's like, yep, I know that.
Yeah. Plus the little manual that says, do not let your children and pets chew on the cords. Yes, it actually says that there somewhere, which we have to ship legally. So that was, I burned out. I really needed a break. So I went to something very different and, learned a lot there. And then from there, I moved to Internet of Things, which back then was called Windows Embedded. And we had a product in Windows Embedded that worked on System Center Configuration Manager. And eventually they said, why are we doing it in the embedded group? Why aren't we doing this in the configuration manager group? And so they brought it in. So I was home again. I had been reorged, and I just felt like Dorothy, like there's no place like home. I was back in Brad Anderson's org. I loved the team. I loved the product, and it was great. And I was in as a PM now, not as a writer. So I was a feature PM for a while. And then and Wally Mead was there managing the MVPs. But when he left Microsoft, they said, well, hey, could you just babysit the MVPs until we figure out who's going to run them? And I said, I'll run them. I love the MVPs. So I started doing that, and then I started doing our user voice, and they finally said, hey, isn't really feature work, and we have this customer experience engineering team over here. We think it would fit better there. And I said, yeah, when they started that team, I actually said, I think my stuff would be better over here. But it just kind of took them a while to catch up. And so that's where I've been. So we have this fantastic org, which is all about helping customers use the product better.
Oh, and honestly, what a better, like, there is no better place to be than, like, actually making that change. Like, genuine, it makes me so happy. Or, like, I did this, and every single person who ever bought this, which is, like, millions and millions, saw that little piece. And I'm, like, obsessed. Like, that is just gold, honestly, for one day.
Yeah. It was awesome. And just, the design thinking, which is different than theater. Because in theater, you kind of have the one vision, then everybody is kind of collaborating in. It was just a little bit different, coming around this, because you have engineering requirements and things like the unboxing. I'd never thought about unboxing products until I got this job, but then part of my job was owning the unboxing experience. So I literally sat in people's living rooms, and there's that mouse that bends, the Arc Touch mouse. Yeah. I watched people open prototype boxes of that so that we could get it right.
I mean, I've literally got it sitting right here.
It's
great. Yeah.
That's my mouse. Yes.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
It's like, that's my mouse.
Along with, dozens of other. I was helping somebody move last weekend, and he actually had the Microsoft Touch mouse, which was the gesture mouse.
Yeah.
Like, I worked on that one too.
It's like, that's my little baby. I love it. Yeah. Oh, that is brilliant. Oh, Cathy, I think we might wrap it up there. I don't know how long we've been chatting, and I've, like, as always, like, I mean, from, like, every guest that I have, I'm like, I could talk for literally hours, but we will put the others through that, and we can just take our own conversations offline. But I'm so thankful for you to come on and chat us through everything that's been happening and how everything worked for you. And I'm just, like, you're one of my favorite people to talk to. So, like, thank you.
Thank you. Well, and I love that you're doing this podcast. I think it is great. And we just need to get the word out, especially to young people, to say, hey, there are so many ways in here. Don't be discouraged. Because some people love coding. And if you love coding, please go code. But if you don't love coding, do what you love and find the tech in it and do that.
That is, oh my God, the best advice you could literally leave off on. Especially, like, and I look at this in terms of, I mean, my own career is just, like, it's wide the spark, right? I mean, mine is just, I never expected to be doing this. But I look at my sister, who's in college right now, and I'm just like, God, child, stop worrying. Like, you'll be fine. It does not matter at all. Like, you will find your way. It doesn't matter what you ended up studying. Like, it'll be fine. It'll sort itself out. And such a good example of, like, so many people figuring it out. It doesn't matter when, but yeah, no, it's a great point to leave this on. So we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, and we shall see you all again in 2 weeks' time. So that was Cathy Moya sharing her career experiences from theatre to canvassing and training people in new tech to actually becoming a program manager and leading multiple different teams with consumer experience kind of at the forefront. I hope that there were some key takeaways from this episode, ranging from kind of networking to not worrying about specific coding jobs you want. There is a space for you in tech. You can make it to be whatever you want it to be. I can't really believe we've had 7 episodes already, and I'm blown away by people listening and reaching out and commenting and sharing on socials. So thank you for the support, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time with another episode.